Hello everybody, this is our weekly vocal technique and warm-up video. We're going to talk today about consonants and vowels, which we've talked about before. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth, in detail. It's kind of interesting and I think it can be really helpful. So I'll speak about consonants first just a little bit. I want to say basically two things about them. One is that sometimes in choirs you hear that you need to accentuate certain consonants or not accentuate certain consonants, and so people get ideas about it. I think in general, it really is dependent on the space that you're in. So sometimes if you're in a really big room with a huge acoustic, the consonants can get lost. So you need to put a little bit more. A choir director might ask you to emphasize a consonant a little more because it's hard to hear for the people who are sitting in a different space. In a big room like that, the vocal sound is going to go up, but the consonants get lost. Now in a dry room, that's not as true. And the reason I bring it up now is in a recording, it's especially not true because when you have your phone or whatever you're using to record, it's going to pick up every little any kind of sound like that is going to be magnified because just the way the recorders work and the frequencies of those consonants and all that kind of thing. So I say all this to say, doing these recordings, it's really good to make your consonants subtle, on the subtle side of things. So you never need to do a big t or tss, p, all of these kind of consonants. You probably can hear it in this video when I go tss, like that peaks my microphone. You don't need to, you can just, if you're going to sing tree, you can just sing, like I'd say tree, but you can just sing tree, tree. It can just be a really light thing. So just something to think about. Don't think about it too much, but in general when you're recording, you can really lay off on the consonants. They can be very subtle. Now, in general, the second thing I want to say about consonants is that when you're singing, you want the consonants to be quick. There are some exceptions to this, mostly for soloists who are trying to use consonants as some kind of expressive tool. But for us as choir members, almost always we want, and also for soloists, this is also true almost all the time, except in rare circumstances, you want to get through the consonant to the vowel as quickly as possible. So if you're singing, it doesn't, any word, lamp, you don't want to hang out on the l, you want to get to the ah sound. Lamp, lamp. You could, especially there's certain consonants like L that you can actually hold a tone on, right? Or M or N. Maybe they call them liquid consonants, or I don't know, I get confused with all that. But you can hold a tone, so you could sing lamp, you could hold that L for a long time, but you don't want to. You want to get through it. Lamp, right to the vowel. And similarly with consonants that you can't, like T or D, dog, you don't want to dog, don't hang out on the consonant. Just get right to the vowel. Dog. So the consonant is this very quick thing, and you're thinking of the start, it happens right on the beat, and then you're immediately into the vowel. So let's talk about vowels. There's two things to think about consonants, right? In recording, we need very little consonant in general. And second, we want to get through them as quickly as possible. And that's definitely true almost all the time that you're singing. So vowels. So there's basically two kinds of vowels, two ways you can think about it. You can have a pure vowel, or you can have a diphthong. So a pure vowel is just a vowel that stays the same. Ah, nothing changes. It just stays on that same kind of ah. That's a pure vowel. It means it doesn't, pure just means it doesn't change. Now a diphthong is when, and we use these all the time in the English language, they happen all of the time. We take two vowels like ah and e, and we do them really fast to create, a cool sound, like bite. The word bite, to bite, if you bite something. We have the vowel ah and the vowel e, happens really quick. If you slow it and you hear bite, if you slow it down, it'd be like bite, right? There's this transition from ah to e that happens. We speak it fast, you don't hear it, it just sounds like one sound. but actually you're going from A to E. Now, this is really important in singing because, especially in the genre of singing that we do in church in choral music, we want to be singing pure vowels as much as possible, really all the time, like 99% of the time. And I'll talk about that in a second. Now, it's always good to know these kind of rules are not always true, like certain genres. Like if you're singing country music, you might have a lot of diphthong, you might have a lot of consonant, because that kind of music is more about, it's more of a talking centric, like you're focused on the speech, the words, it's about the story, right? So there's more of this emphasis on a colloquial kind of dialect. Now, the other side of the spectrum would be like classical music in a cathedral, where you just want a pure vowel all the time. And it's kind of cool. There's something cool about singing that you would think that people wouldn't be able to understand you by just singing these pure vowels and having very short consonants and a very short diphthong at the end. But actually, people can totally understand you. It's been my experience, like singing in other languages, German, French, Italian. Like I can sing these songs, and I don't know these languages, hardly at all. And I definitely don't really know the words that I'm singing sometimes. But people who are native speakers, who I've sung these songs for, they completely understand that it sounds exactly right. So to them, it almost sounds like I'm a native speaker singing. So my point is, there's something very interesting about how singing kind of, it makes comprehension easier on a certain level. So I just say that all to say, don't worry, don't think that, well, if I don't sing bite, if I don't do that, people aren't going to understand. They're going to understand. Okay, so now here's the trick. This is the main trick. We'll talk about it in two parts. The second part we've already talked about, but the first part's a more basic part, and I want to emphasize it again today. So basically, when you're singing in this style, any word that you see, you want to translate what is the pure vowel. And in general, as singers, we think there's 5 vowels. A, E, O, U. We've talked about that, right? And you want to figure out what that vowel is on that word, and then you just want to sing that vowel. Like, this is really simple, but this is a very functional way to think about things. So the word bite, it's an ah. So you're just going to sing B as quickly as possible, and then ah. And you're going to do that for 99%. Ba. That's bite. And then the ite part is only going to happen at the very end. Let's say you're going to hold it for 4 beats and cut off on the 5th. It would sound like this. Bite. Just at that last little bit, just as you're about to hit the 5th syllable. But that rest of it is all on this ah vowel. And if you've never done this before, if you haven't practiced this way, it's really hard because you're so used to singing, saying these words a certain way. You have to really force yourself to hold that vowel. And you may even think you're holding it, and you're not. You have to either have a teacher that sits there and says, no, you need to hold the vowel longer, or have a recorder to listen to yourself singing it. I'm just, all that to say, it is a little tricky. But this is the idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice this for a second. So I'm going to switch to my screen here, and we're going to look at a psalm. So we're going to just look at these words and think about how we're going to parse them. How are we going to analyze and think about these as we sing them? So if we have I, so the first line, I will bless the Lord at all times. So I, that's a big diphthong, right? Same as in bite, A to E. But we're just going to sing ah. I, and the I is just going to come at the very end. Now will, wi. So is this vowel that's kind of in between A and E. You can, in general, it's good to kind of err towards the side of the E vowel in any case, because E is very nasal and can lose the roundness that we want in this style. So you could just think of this as like W-E-L-L. I will. And again, you might think, well, people aren't going to understand it. They're totally going to understand it. There's not going to be one person that doesn't understand it. I promise. All vocal teachers will promise you. I promise you. If you do it, you will find it out for yourself. So, ah for I, for well, for bless, right? That's easy. Now what about the? So then we have this sound. So this is kind of a variation on ah. We don't want a the, right? This is more of a, the tongue is a little more relaxed. We call this like the schwa sound, something like that. The. It's very similar to ah. There's just a little bit less action of the tongue. The. Now what about Lord? That's very easy, right? Oh. And then how about at? So I'm from the Midwest. I particularly emphasize this kind of sound with this at, with something like at or bat or cat. We don't want to do that. It doesn't sound good. So here you can go ah. You can go toward an ah. And you can, if it sounds too much, like too British to sing ought, that's a little ridiculous. You can play around a little bit. So you take the pure vowel and you might just start with the pure vowel and then maybe open it up toward like the, more of an sound. Or maybe more up toward an S sound like bless. Yeah, I would say more of this is closer to an and then all, that's just a nice deep ah. And times is also just a nice deep ah. So if I were to exaggerate what you will actually be doing, just for the sake of you to hear it, if you were going to sing this very slowly, you would sing, I will bless the Lord at all times. And that's actually, even that seems really exaggerated, but that's basically what you want to do. If you've never done that before, I'm going to switch back to the video. If you've never done that before, it's going to feel really weird. But it's good to practice, like even just a little bit, to start to get yourself to think that way as you sing these songs. It makes a huge difference, not only in, basically it's helping you create the kind of sound we want. From a number of angles. One is just kind of like physically, to help keep this space. You can't be, doing all of this over-exaggerated stuff with vowels and consonants. You want your mouth to be in this shape, and it more or less stays there, and everything is very subtle to kind of create these sounds. But also, it just sounds better. If you're singing all of these, some people don't like country music because it has all these diphthongs, and it just is like, it sounds, kind of goofy to us who don't have that accent. It doesn't sound goofy to them. In fact, it sounds great. So there's nothing wrong with it. But in this genre, and in the way we're trying to sing, having this pure vowel is the sound we're looking for. It's what you want. It's what will sound good to people. And when you go to the diphthong, if you go to a diphthong too fast, if you hang out on consonants too long, it doesn't sound as good. So this leads me to my second and final point, which we've talked about, which is vowel modification. So we've talked about when you go high, you can change the vowel. So this is exactly like what we're talking about here, where you take a word, right, and you figure out what the pure vowel is. Now the idea is when you go higher, you need to relax the vowel toward ah. So we've talked about the spectrum, like ah or is the kind of like neutral sound, and you can go this way from ah to o to oo, which is just your lips, and you can go from ah to e, which has nothing to do with the lips and everything to do with the tongue. So it's like there's two directions you can go, where either your tongue starts to move to create the vowel, or your lips start to move to create the vowel. So what happens is when you go higher, you want to slowly move back toward the ah, where in fact, oftentimes if you're singing very high, if you're a tenor or a soprano, the word might be tree, and you might be singing ah. I mean, it's not going to feel very different from ah. Like you release that much into relax that much, and it happens in a scale. So if you take vocal lessons, classical vocal lessons, you'll practice like how you go up. So if you start with E, and then it slowly transitions to as you get higher, and then up to ah when you're at the very top, and it doesn't sound like it because when you get to that high, there's already these overtones that make it work, but they're singing ah. I mean, their mouth shape, to them it feels like ah, like that's what they're going for, but it sounds like E. So especially for tenors and sopranos, but also for basses and altos, as you get into the upper part of your range, relax towards ah. So if you're if you're on the E side of things, I don't remember what side I started on, you first relax toward and then you relax toward ah. If you're on the oo side of things, ooh, this side is not as important. You can still, you don't need to have so much pointedness with your lips. But because the tongue isn't what's changing, it's a little bit easier on this side. But still, you go from ooh. You're making that kind of transition. So just to give a little example, I'll try. If you start with E, I'm going to start with E in the lower part of my range and work my way up. And I'll see how well I can transition it. So be. So to get to the top, it's like an ah, and at the bottom, it's like a e. Yeah, actually, every morning for the morning prayer I do this Hildegard song that's Kyrie, and she's all over. It's very high, goes very low, goes very high, and so I'm constantly having to I have to deal with this every morning. I'm not very good at it. It's hard to do that seamlessly, but we don't need you to be perfect musicians. It doesn't need to be seamless. It's just good to know if you're having a hard time on a high note, you're singing it and it's just not feeling good, it's probably, the first thing to check, and most of the time what the problem is, you're just trying to have this closed down shape in your mouth. You just need an open shape. You can totally go to ah. You can totally feel free to go to ah. Go to ah first, get the sound you want, and then slowly, play a little bit to bring it back toward ari. So if you're up here on ah, I can just do a little, I can just do a teeny little bit with my tongue to get it to go to ah. So here's a pure ah, and then I'm just going to do a teeny little bit so you can hear how you can just with a small movement get to the E. Ah. So it might still sound like ah to you, but that would be plenty of E at that part of my range. Okay, I think I've been talking enough. Hopefully you learned a little bit from this. So to review what we said, consonants in recording, subtle, soft, not big consonants. 2, always in general when you're singing, get through the consonants to the pure vowel as quickly as possible. And then as we're singing, so the pure vowel is just like a vowel that doesn't change. And there's, the 5, I, O, and we're in general trying to go toward these with every word. And we start and we hold that for 98% of however the duration of the pitch. And that last second, right into the last bit, then you go through the diphthong and into the final consonant. So it's like you have this thing right at the beginning of a word and right at the end. And this whole long stretch in between is a pure vowel. This is the way to think about it. You've got whatever the word is, you have the first consonant happens really fast, and you have the very last, final consonant, and whatever the diphthong is, whatever vowel you move to, that happens really fast. And this huge area in between that's just a pure vowel. And that pure vowel doesn't have to be, depending on where you are in your range. If you're up higher, you can relax that vowel toward a more neutral shape that allows you to have more space in your mouth. So thanks for watching. Hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next time.